Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our second panel today, third day of Monkey Week. We still have 3 more days to go. As you all know, from 5 p.m. until 2 a.m., we have 8 hours non-stop live broadcast from Sala X in Seville. Today at 6 p.m., we have a debate about gender equality in festival lineups with Alex Bruford, director of ATC Live booking agency, and with Cindy Castillo, booker at Mad Cool Festival, and moderated by Gustavo Iglesias from Radio 3 in Spain, and many other things, and lots of shows, and then myself and two other hosts saying silly things on camera. But now this is the professional side, the professional part of the festival. So I'll try not to say too many silly things. I'll introduce our guests for this panel today about music writing or music criticism versus algorithms. We have Cynthia Flores, all the way from Mexico. She's the director of Indie Rocks and the booker at Hypnosis Festival. Richard Foster, who works at Warm, an avant-garde venue in Rotterdam, and is a regular contributor to the Quietus UK website. Ruben van Dijk from Holland as well. He's co-founder of Front, and Paul Bridgewater, who's the editor at the Line of Best Fit in the UK. Moderating this panel will be VÍCTOR LENORE, who writes currently for VOZPÓPULI in Spain, but he is a freelance writer with a long career. So VÍCTOR, I hand it over to you, and I'll be back with questions from the public in the last 10 minutes of the talk.
Thanks a lot, John. Well, since we have a short time and a lot of topics, let's get straight to the point, to the title of the talk. Do you think that the new technologies, that music algorithms have killed music journalism and music criticism? What's your view on that? Cynthia, for instance, let's start with you.
Sure. Well, I think we are right now in a new era, a new technology era, and all generations are like trying to have this. We all embrace new technologies and new streaming platforms, and I think we still listening to music as with all generations with all the emotions we had since the beginning of our years of consuming music, as we can say, consuming. I don't like the word consuming, but it's like, for this time, it's just the way we are doing it, and we are just evolving and finding new ways to find out more music by Spotify, Apple, Bandcamp, SoundCloud. There are so many places to continue to share this curiosity to find out more bands, and I feel right now that there's still a lot of new generations that are looking for new kind of musics and mixes and experimental things that I really don't think it's dying. And I don't know, my other team, the other guys, if you feel the same. I don't know. I don't feel that it's dying, or it's just getting new ways, new rivers, and it's just that, but it's
Robert?
still being there.
Robert, for instance, what's your take on that? Robert?
Robert? There's no Robert.
Richard.
Richard, excuse me. I forgot.
No worries. No, don't worry.
Sorry.
Could have been a lot worse. I take issue with the question, because it's always, you always see these questions about new music and algorithms. I mean, music's got a lifetime, it's got a lifespan that is longer than it being new. And it sort of presupposes that we always have this endless Sisyphean treadmill of going round and round, finding something new and new and new and new. I mean, we live our lives with music. You know, this morning I've been listening to Bruckner, and I've been listening to a new record on a new Dutch label called Soft Office. You know, that's just come out. So it's impossible to apply these timelines, and we should actually maybe step away from that. So that was my first point. I mean, music is just a constant in our lives. We should treat it in a different way, as we should treat our own lives and our relationship with music. That's the first thing I'd say. So in many ways, the question, you know, we should stop asking ourselves these questions and stop beating ourselves up about them. Secondly, I think that, as Cynthia rightly says, we're living in a time of change. It's akin to sort of the printing press of the 16th century, isn't it? You know, our minds are getting completely altered by this entire new way of slicing and dicing information, and it drives some people mad. It makes some people, you know, more authoritarian. It makes more people want to act like the technology itself, which we've seen, I think, in the last 5-6 years, where people think, I've got to improve my search engine optimization in this piece, rather than trust their own human reaction to the music. That's another thing that, you know, we're still in the middle of that. It's still a maelstrom of trying to work out where we are as human beings within that. And you know what? I'm happy to accept our digital robot overlords. If they want to do all the hard work of, you know, making algorithms and sending them out there and doing all that, let them do it. I mean, we should also question who's making these algorithms. Who is creating these things? I think, is it just a certain set of people? You know, when machines start talking to each other, I mean, how do we relate to that? I think we just got to trust. I mean, to sum all my nonsense up, I think we should just trust ourselves as human beings a bit more and realize that we're still in the game. We're not going anywhere.
Exactly.
Paul, previously when we were talking, you made a distinction between music journalism and music criticism. Maybe it's relevant in
I mean, I think the two things are very distinct in this. If you look at the power that criticism had, and, you know, album reviews in particular, over the last sort of 15-20 years, you know, there was a shift initially away from NME and Rolling Stone and The Guardian to Pitchfork, you know, which had a lot of power for a very long time. And then I think when Spotify really hit and happened, and social media really hit and happened, and people were taking the conversation about records to their own spaces, Pitchfork were robbed of a lot of the power they had, and I don't think that's come back. And I think sites like the QUIETUS actually have done a very good job in finding a way to make criticism valid. Sort of more Richard talking about algorithms and SEO and stuff, I think the QUIETUS have actually played SEO really well in a way that's entirely natural because of the kind of, you know, polemics that they put out there, which are fantastic. And I think the reason the QUIETUS and people like us have survived is because we've tried to kind of find a way to stay relevant in that way. From our side, we've looked more at music writing. I don't think as a site we can offer the same kind of polemic that the QUIETUS are offering. So we focus probably a lot more on trying to tell the story of artists. And I think that's what's changed too, is the launching pad for new artists is very different from it used to be. It's not that blogs and websites and magazines are starting the conversation anymore. We're just one facet of that conversation and of illustrating the story of an artist. And quite often we'll get pulled into doing a very long piece on, you know, a very new or a very well-known artist, simply because the people who are working with that artist know that we can actually add some color to that story that someone else isn't going to add. So starting off with a new artist, going through Spotify and Apple and going through music sections of, say, newspapers, you know, you're limited by word count, you're limited by the kind of conversations that you want to have. So, you know, we've tried to pick up the story in a new way to stay relevant. And I think that's what's worked for us. But I don't know, like, I don't see technology as fundamentally destroying people's brain cells. I think it's just shifted the kind of true north of where music lies. And people who have survived in this, entities that have survived, have found a way to weave around that and make themselves relevant. And it's been hard, and it is about pivoting quite a lot, really.
Ruben, as the youngest member of our panel, how do you see it?
Yeah, I think Paul said it very well. And what I feel is that, I mean, of course, in the last 10 years, you've seen such an unstoppable force as Spotify, like, radically changed the dynamic of this entire industry.
Excuse me, a bit. I think the volume is too low. Does everybody hear it low or?
A little bit.
Yeah, a little, yes.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Can someone do something about it?
I think it's the headphones.
The headphones.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the headphones.
Maybe the volume. Yeah.
That should improve.
Okay. Okay, go on. Thank you.
You okay?
Can you talk a bit?
I'll just start talking and you can stop me if it's not audible.
Not yet.
It's audible, but it's very, very low in my opinion. I don't know.
Okay,
Yes.
that's weird.
Okay.
I'm not a technical expert, so I don't know how to improve this. But
Okay.
I can understand you.
Okay.
It's better. It's better.
Bit low, but we understand you. Okay.
It's better than before.
Okay.
Anyway, yeah. So I'm with this changing dynamic in the music industry, with this unstoppable force that I think has overpowered a lot of the formerly influential places like Pitchfork. I mean, it's still influential, but not as much, I think. I think there's either, as a big platform, you're struggling to adapt to that. But what I feel is, for a platform like Front, we've been able to carve out a space that's entirely separate from that, or not, or tries to be separate from that narrative of all these algorithms, playlists, this big influence of Spotify. It doesn't have to impact it as in such a major way. I think, and the QUIETUS, as Paul said, also does a really good job of that. You can still have that quality and kind of sideline yourself from that changed dynamic in the industry, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And I feel like we with Front have allowed us to not worry about all that and just tell the stories we want to tell, and take more time for that, even because there's so much short, fast content everywhere. I think there's an upside, or there's a positive thing to be said for focusing entirely on this long form to compensate for all that's out there. That's not that.
Mm-hmm. We just said a very interesting thing, that the algorithm is not a neutral entity, that it has, you have power structures. I want to know that if you see the technology, especially algorithms, but in general, the Silicon Valley big enterprises, do you see them as an enemy? Do you see them as an ally? What's your relation to them? And do you think this is something that we have to fight against or not? Or what's your...
I mean, I kind of wonder about the fact that, before all of this stuff existed, you had a set of structures that were almost like a testing ground for this. You had playlists on radio stations, you had sync placements on soap operas and films and there was an element of pushing this kind of stuff to the foreground anyway, and it's just that's kind of shifted much more onto Spotify as a starting point, I think. But it's not a lot different, in the way that maybe we treated the enemy a few years ago as commercial radio, or as the stuff you'd hear in the supermarket.
Totally.
It isn't that different, really.
No, not at all.
The only difference is, I think you can play it a lot more. You can find ways to place it. We're talking about Spotify and Apple and things, but things like TikTok have incredible power now, potentially more than Spotify, and are ended up dictating what happens with Spotify and Apple Music and stuff.
Can I just jump in, Paul? Because that was actually interesting that you just mentioned TikTok, isn't it? If I'm not mistaken, didn't The Caretaker actually have a bit of a hit on TikTok because people were using The Caretaker's music to backdrop some of their films? So you have someone like The Caretaker, who's this like rabid avant-garde figure mixing up 1930s dance tracks, Al Bowley and the like, making records about Alzheimer's, living in Poland, and then, being covered by the Ursula, that's my good friend John Doran, and, sort of getting a medium amount of people getting into him. And then suddenly TikTok someone picks up on The Caretaker on TikTok, and then everyone's into him. It just shows, doesn't it, that in some ways you can't, even a programmed machine can't stop.
Exactly.
You know,
we should ask to Fleetwood Mac, no, with that, that viral video. It's like,
by the same degree, there was a piece on, I think, Sterigum yesterday about this Pavement B-side that suddenly went to the top of Pavement's profile and was getting millions of views. And they figured it was because it was being pushed out there through the algorithm, because melodically it was very similar to a lot of songs that people were listening to. But no one really knew why that was happening. And it was a very, very obscure Pavement B-side.
I think that if I could jump in as the young person who's grown up, who's developed this music taste but through Spotify, I can't imagine anything. I mean, having talked to people who haven't had that experience, I think the bottom line is that it's added so much, because all these things are suddenly available. You can have Pavement B-sides in TikTok videos. That's just an unimaginable, or that's such a enriching thing. To have all that available, to have everything that there is available to cross-pollinate and to get music that people would never have found otherwise, and make them fall in love with it. I think that if that's the bottom line, that's the great thing. That's the greatest thing. And of course, there's so much to criticize about the streaming service, the business model of it. But I think that's also something that should be underlined. That's added so much to music consumption. And music, or experiencing music for people all around the world.
No, I agree. And speaking as probably the oldest person here, me. I think that I don't want to go back to the days of 1983. Waiting every Wednesday for a paper to turn up in my news box, and then wonder when the next Echo and the Bunnymen single's coming out, and then having to go into Manchester to get it because you couldn't get it in when I was living, and all this sort of nonsense to go and get it. And it's the schlep of it that is gone. And in many ways, that's a very good thing to remember when we constantly, I think again, I go back to the question, we constantly think about the now and the future. We are failing to apply a timeline to our experiences as music writers or people involved with popular music. That sometimes if you look back at the past, you are able actually to see the future a bit ahead of you, or have an idea of where you are. And we really forget that at our peril. I do not want to go back to the days of payola when you've got people, girls being sent in to be abused in certain broadcasting centres so they could get a record on the radio and all this sort of stuff. The payola scandal. You've got all these things that float past in the history of rating popular music, shall we put it. So I think on the whole it's a good thing. We learn to live with it, and we're human beings, we'll adapt. Sure. To use made fire with sticks, didn't we?
Richard,
yeah.
Let me do a comment here. There was recently some news that said that Spotify is planning to charge artists for highlighting their context, their music, their albums. This is kind of a legalized payola with a very powerful enterprise in the industry. What do you think about?
Well, I think it's immoral. But fine.
More.
I mean, there's other sites doing pay to. I mean,
of course,
recently pay to play, wasn't there? And
the funny thing about that is that there's agencies and individuals making money already, charging bands to try and play.
Sure. Actually, since the beginning, there were ads, and there are major labels ads when you get in, and you. It was that since the beginning. I don't see any difference, totally.
Well, the difference is you had like 5 or 6 radio stations in each country, or important radio stations, and now we have more 1 or 2 competitors in the market, I think.
In the worldwide, you mean that? Well, yeah, I find it like, as Richard said, like, when we go to the supermarket, we listen the same music, and we listen the same. It has always been like the mainstream. That's the mainstream. It's gonna find out that there were ways too in all the technologies, and what we as media and as music consumers, specialized, we are really trying to find out like new ways to find out all the indie bands and the underground bands too, because it's in our, you know, in our veins, in our there are like a lot of kids right now. I have my son, he's 5 years old, and he listens to some music, and I see how he chooses, you know, the different things that Marvel shows in the Ramones song, no, in a Marvel movie, and he just pick up that, and he's 5 years, you know. I think there is gonna be like a lot of mainstream ways to find out how to, you know, like do the same thing as they have been doing like since all the decades. But I know it's not a difference, you know.
One of the things I find quite interesting about Spotify is we don't talk about it so much as a publishing platform for people like us. So I think when we started using it, we used it to kind of augment features. We would do a feature on a certain genre or a band, and we'd maybe add a playlist with a mix of tracks. And now we've shifted entirely to try and be our own presence on Spotify with a, you know, weekly playlist like most people do with picks for new music. But that in itself has been a whole interesting challenge over about a 3-year period to build an audience and listen how we can play the algorithm as well, and find a way to make that playlist have value. And I think we got to maybe 3,000 followers with that playlist. And at that point, we started getting pitched just for the playlist. And the playlist itself became an entity in its own right. And now we treat it very much as another publishing platform. It's not something that augments the site as much as we aim to give a platform to new artists through our playlist weekly. And that's as far as it goes. And we might pick up that artist to do more with on the site itself, but it's its own thing in the way that Instagram is as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and people trust you, how you pick for them, as they can put their discovery playlist, but they still choose you to find out like the music you are like doing the filter, you know.
Yeah.
We have this capacity, no, this living capacity that people still choose.
That's been interesting in its own right, because, you know, you compare the concept of what new music is to Spotify through their new music playlists to the kind of stuff we're covering on our site day to day, and there's a massive disparity. There's a lot of bands that just completely miss those playlists. They're just not getting plays for whatever reasons. And that's really unfortunate. And I think that's another facet of music discovery that Spotify won't ever be able to catch up on. No. There's a whole gulf. You know, that's where sites like Bandcamp maybe come into having their own kind of power in some ways.
Let me make another question. We're talking a lot of about age here. Do you think there's a generation problem that maybe 20-somethings don't even know what the music press is and don't have a clear idea, so this is going to be a bad thing for the...
But I wonder if they ever did. You know, we've never gone down in our traffic on the site. It's grown and grown and grown. I just think there's always an audience, a small percentage of music fans who have that level of interest and passion for music, who will always want to read books and do deep dives through Wikipedia. And, you know, they will discover sites like the sites that you see here. That's what happens. I don't think it's changed so much. That audience will always exist.
I agree totally with that. I mean, working at Worm, all my interns, God. But, I mean, I had to say that's the official way to say it, of course. They're all 19, 20 years old, and they're all wanting to write, and they're all interested in music, and they're all, you know, of course, this, you know, when I grew up, not everyone was into the bands or the music I was into. I think the only thing that's really changed is the hierarchy is different, in the sense that the hierarchies of accessing music and the hierarchies of valuing music has changed a lot in my lifetime, in terms of, you know, the top 40 idea. Also the fact that, you know, there are certain trusted agents on the radio who, you know, certain people you'd listen to. certain TV shows you'd watch. So in that respect, it was very top down. And like as everyone's mentioned here, that's completely changed from 5-year-olds picking the Ramones, you know, Ruben's generation who are just finding everything they want to do. Paul mentions the Pavement B-side. What's changed is the fact it's much more lateral now, and the conversations are much more intergenerational than they ever were. I remember once talking to the Beatles roadie, and he used to work in a factory I used to work in. This is a long time ago, and it was a case of like, this is the sort of stuff that, you know, the sort of thing that Howard Carter would be bringing out of Tutankhamun's tomb, you know, these sort of stories of, oh, and John was like this, and these are the sort of things that were essentially private back then. And now a lot of this stuff is much more public and much more accessible. And that means that people don't need to spend 15 years learning about it. They can find out in about half an hour to get together a case to talk to someone about, you know, bands from the 1980s. I had this 19-year-old kid working at Worm, obsessed by Ride. And I'd seen Ride play their first 4 or 5 gigs, you know, 1988 or something like that, 1989. And he was just, oh, yeah, but I'm thinking, why are you into Ride? Shouldn't you be into, I don't know, Kanye or something? No, it doesn't matter, does it? So in that respect, a lot of the idea of age to me is, I don't know, I just don't see it as actually being there anymore. It's completely disappeared.
Ruben, do you have any opinions on that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that Richard said it used to be so top down, which it mean is completely vanished or mostly vanished. And I feel that as Front, we're just like contributing in our way to a conversation that is being contributed to in so many ways, is being through festivals being held that create their own kind of discourse. I think that it's just everyone's game at this point, where everybody's just chipping into this conversation about music. And in this music experience, I think there's a valuable position there for platforms like ours. But its role has changed, and I think that's probably influenced. I mean, we've only launched 2 years ago, so I can't speak for that. But influence how you approach or how you value your own position in that, or how much influence you have. But I think there's definitely a position there, but it's just more of a conversation that everybody can be a part of, and that is possible in so many ways.
Yeah, this exchange of music is a necessity. It's, as Paul said, we are storytellers, and there are a lot of people that it's really happy to read the stories and to know for real what's. I mean, I'm a hippie girl, you know, but when there are a lot of people that really needs to listen their heart, why they exist, no? What was the story? Why can I feel like connected with this band, not just for the great show or the great, you know, the clothes and it's just more. We need to know more about them and to connect with them, and there are still people that really wants to get that from the bands from here in Latin America. It's just, yeah, we have these bands that are always, we don't have like so much like touring, but we really need to have this approach with the capacity and the roots that they find out in our music, in our, you know, in our land. And it's a very interesting thing that we people need to hear and to read, and we see, as Paul said, the numbers, you see the clicks, and they're still being there. They are there.
I'd like to talk a bit about money, because someone, I think Richard mentioned in the previous talk, that there is it's important to talk about it. That there is a risk that music journalism, for instance, becomes a job just for rich people, for people that can afford it. This is happening already in bands. It's much more difficult to have a band if you're a working class people, because you cannot afford to stay 2 years without income, and it's much easier if you have a good position, because you can afford to stay 2 or 3 years without income and wait to see if you have success. Do you think this is a real risk, or what does it worry you about these money conflicts?
I think a mutual friend of Richard and mine said to me a while back that that a band is not a cocoon. We're talking about just for Richard. It said to me like a band is not a mythical creature, and that this creativity. I mean, I see it in the Netherlands a lot. This creativity is constant, and there's always these same people keep on making music. And if it's not a band that is successful in their way, they might dissolve and come back in a new form or with a new project. I think the creativity is still very much there. It's everywhere, but maybe bands won't have as long of a run as previously they might have because of the issues you mentioned. But I think that's a consequence of the industry for sure. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing in that sense.
Shall I wait? I'll wait for one of you two, and then I'll charge in.
No more opinions on that?
Oh, I've got plenty of opinions.
Okay, I think
Let Richard talk.
All right, okay. You can feel it, can't you? Well, again, one of my anecdotes, I remember sitting with Terry Hessels from the X, the guitarist from the X, and he was on a panel, I won't say which festival, and he was surrounded by people saying, "Oh, the X, 30 odd years of the X at the time. How do you manage?" And Terry lives off €1,000 a month. He's built his own house. He builds his own car, tours, gets grants. He ducks and dives. And this sigh of disappointment was audible when they said how much Terry was earning. Now, Terry just does it because he's 62 years old and he enjoys doing it. He's an ex-punk and he does it. That's Terry's thing. I think the reason I mentioned that parable is that, like the idea of new music, like the idea of algorithms, all these words that we keep using to umbrella terms to describe how the music industry is working, the idea of income is something else that we have devolved from actuality to our own peril. And we keep going round and round and round talking about money as if it's like vital and we can't do anything without it, which is a nonsense. I don't get a lot of money for writing. I get my money at Worm, and I do other things associated with the fact that I write on the Quietus, and people know me from the Quietus and Louder Than War. And then they go, "Oh yeah, but you're the guy who does for the Quietus," and then I get something from that. In many ways, the money aspect has actually freed us up in the sense that we're able then to be much more flexible in the way that we work, flexible in what we choose. Maybe better writers, certainly, because we're actually having to broaden our templates a bit. And also in terms of, do I do a press release? I did a press release for an Accrington, which is an East Lancashire town, an Accrington Rotary Club recently because someone knew about my writing in the Quietus. You know what? Brilliant. That to me is how it should be anyway. We do need to think more in the round. And I think we have to sort of take away these assumptions that, that we're getting paid as a music journalist and we've got this and this is how we think. A lot of that cladding, which has been imposed since the late 1960s and has sort of now hopefully croaked its last gasp before Corona, can now be taken away. We can actually start to look at ourselves in a different way. We're very skilled, clever, passionate people who actually happen to have a lot more to offer than just writing about the latest band and worry about being put out of work by an algorithm.
I think there's another facet to music sites, probably more than magazines as well, that's not really talked about, which is that we are as important for the people that write for us as we are for the audience. We're incubators for talent. I can name probably 20 people that have gone onto The Guardian and Vice and edit major newspaper sections now who wrote for us at various points. And that's 50% of what we do. It's about offering a space for someone who feels like they might have something to say or want to pursue a career in some facet of music. And it's not just writing. Our staff go on to be people in sync. They manage, one of our staff works with Spotify, for example, which is really funny. That's as important to us as the bands that we cover and the audience. It's 1/3 of the equation, And that's another reason why we continue. You know, there'll always be people that want to write about music in the same way there's people that want to read about it. And in terms of the audience as well, that isn't just music fans, that's industry. You know, they're an important part of who we're facing towards. We give bands a platform at a very early stage, and the number of eyes on that particular story or piece of content might be quite small, but it's potentially quite influential. You know, managers will read our content because they're looking for bands that they want to work with. And that's really important to us. And, you know, that bucks the algorithm entirely.
Actually, here in Indie Rocks, we started as a printed magazine. We stopped printing it like 3 years ago, but the economical main way we survived was the forum the venue we have here in Mexico City, and the forum supported the media, and right now we don't have concerts, so maybe we can close off this, you know, but right now we feel that we cannot do that, you know. There's still being people like trying to move their music here in Mexico, in Latin America. We really need these places, you know. They don't, we don't have too much in Spanish, you know, places, but we think we're doing a job that it's really doing something for the community, you know. Maybe I don't know. I was thinking about like the difference between entertainment and cultural, you know, ways to visualize the music, and this difference makes sometimes like very difficult. If you want to have the entertainment, maybe you're not gonna do that money you want, but if you're doing something cultural for your country and your people that really needs these spaces, you're gonna continue, you know, this job. You just needed to do that. It's like in your blood, and this passion you Paul said, it's like it's there, and we're going to continue. If there, you know, right now you can open a blog for free, you know, so we can do and continue like punk, you know, doing efforts. We don't know how we're gonna continue doing that, but we're going to continue with it's, you know. I'm Cynthia, I'm gonna continue. I really swear. and there's a lot of 50 people that writes in indie rock that they're gonna be there, you know.
I think in a society, there should be more emphasis on the importance of the creative pursuit over the money aspect of it, because be it in bands, being in bands or being as a music writer. I mean, we're a small blog, and we started Front with not with the idea that we were going to make any money out of it. Still not a lot of money going through. More than we expected, but still, that's not what it's about for us, and that was a very freeing thought when we said that to ourselves. Like, this is not our goal. We wanna pursue these creative ideas that we have, and we want to create a space for both these artists that we want to appreciate in a creative way. That and a lot of these bands are not making any money out of it, but it's about the creative thing, and also for. As Paul said, just giving this space for writers to develop and tell the things that they want to say. I think that's the most important thing, and that's very liberating to leave the money out of that equation. How even though it's everywhere, money is everywhere, but it's good to shut that off sometimes.
Not in my pocket, mate, but there you go.
Yeah, I feel that.
So can I say one thing about, I mean, it picks up on what everyone said, is that something that is of enormous worth and being proved now as we all look at each other through this liquid crystal display panel, is the beauty and the nourishment that friendship actually brings, certainly through when you get friendly with people who are in your own industry, people in bands, people who work in venues, other creatives in associated arts. You know, I would say I've got some fantastic friends I've made over the years who were once from some people from being my idols, and from people who I've been able to help. As Paul said, we also incubate people to get people through, and I think in many ways we actually have a much wider network of contacts, friends, and fellow creative people who are able to inspire us. Much more than many people who get a lot of money and sit and don't get out. So in that respect, it's an enormous comfort to have that. And I think sometimes we forget these things. We just concentrate on these goals that I've said previously have been set up in a previous era, and we should actually start to turn around and actually re-examine, what is of worth. If there's no cash, it's like Pete Jenner said, when there was no money with Pink Floyd, the feeling was all, and then the money came in and wrecked them. That's I like the fact I've got friends, however, all three of them, but it's important to have,
Sure.
There's the culture sector is supported by the state in many ways. Do you think that the state has any kind of obligation towards the music press or not in these difficult times?
It's part of I think we media are like part of the story. We have been invited from other countries, actually, from Norway, from Spain, and as to look out what is there and come to Mexico to tell everyone what we saw, what we heard. So yes, well, here in Mexico we don't have that kind of support. We're trying to do our own efforts, but well, that's another story. But yes, it should be like, as I told you, the difference between entertainment and cultural. Their countries have to embrace the cultural, music that we all have in our own country. So, yes.
So, Richard, do you think that the state has any obligation with the music press ecosystem?
Speaking as an English expat in the Netherlands, and I work at a state-subsidised venue, which has just been given an awful lot of money to carry on. And I think the state should carry on giving me money to waste as much as I can, and waste in a really annoying way, because in that respect, I do believe in waste culture, actually, in the sense that waste provides the fertiliser for things that you never realise will happen in the future. We're not there to describe it or to prejudge or to presage it. In terms of a music, I think, I do and I don't. I think I see how people get lazy with state money, because when I came over to the Netherlands, I saw how people just got into these, and there's a nice little club in the Netherlands that stays within its own little world and stays there. And that's normally state subsidised or subsidised things or established things. And there's never really a way to push against that. That also exists a bit in Britain. I do think that there should be a bottom level to say, right, the state will spend money on particular outlets of things. But there again, the danger is who's making that decision. And who's going to, is it going to be some guy who buys his cufflinks from Toy Kenning and Spencer in Kensington, or is it going to be, or is it going to be someone, from my neck of the woods? This is the problem. Who do you give the money to give the money? And I think that's a question that needs to be asked before I can give a proper answer. But if people give me money, I'm going to waste it, and that's how it should be.
I think I'd echo that a little bit. I mean, there is money available in the UK, for example, if you, as a publication, wanted to go to South by Southwest and put a stage on. Whether the people taking that money would be using it responsibly and genuinely putting on bands that they felt would bring a return in terms of bringing tax back into the country, I doubt it very much. And I think that's part of the problem, is, the gatekeepers of new music as a financial entity, where there is going to be a return on funding, aren't necessarily doing it responsibly. So I would actually feel a little bit uncomfortable about taking money from the government knowing why I was doing it, you know, and I'm very socialist, but at the same time, I don't necessarily think it does. You know, I mean, we sprung up just in that period after where I think blogs were still making money, where there was enough money coming in through Google Ads and things like that. So we never figured money into the equation. We always decided the best way to progress was to come up with a financial strategy that meant we could survive and our bottom line was always going to be solid. And we do very well financially, but, you know, I don't feel entitled. You know, I don't think necessarily we give value, because we will always do our own thing. And sometimes our own thing will intersect with what breaks. You know, we'll have a hand in a new band getting huge, and sometimes we won't. But, you know, giving us money would, I think, and should come with requirements to do that. You know, there should be a return on it. Any grants you give to this sector should have a return on it. That's how it should work. Otherwise, people are just going to waste that money.
Like Richard.
I don't know. Here in Mexico, well, no, in Chile, I have a very, very, very good example here about Chile, because they always are coming to Mexico, the bands, and I don't know. I think it's a very good, you know, exchange of music that we're having with Chile, and Chile government take us there to, you know, to look out everything, and I think that that is a very good exercise. But when I was in Chile, people there told me, like, we like you Mexicans because you don't have any support from your government, but you are bigger, you know, in the industry than us, and what's happening. And maybe it's that we feel comfortable with that money, and we go there and we just go there, and no, we don't continue like our job because it was easy. maybe that's another thing. But here, when we don't have in Mexico that support, I just feel that it's necessary to get something else for the bands, no? And well, this is like two opinions, but I just see the differences that you tell, like, right now. And well,
I think you know, an overall state funding is it's dodgy ground. I mean, I've seen what happens. I mean, I write a bit about Russian music, as some people might know, and I see what happens with the funding that goes to Russian music, or what is and what isn't funded. I see it in the Netherlands as well. You can see it in Belgium. You know, I've been on panels where you've had some very, very well-dressed people wondering about diversity in music, and you're thinking, you know, right, yeah. And you know, but it's always the fact that there are certain people at the top, and they come from a particular kind of background, and they have a particular kind of education, and they have a particular kind of connections that we don't particularly share. And that is something that has to be addressed before we start to ask, you know, the Watts Tylers of this world, us lot, about who's got the money, because we can't actually add to that conversation outside of the fact that it's saying that we're very honest and we've got lots of great music and we're very creative and we work hard, because all we're doing is ensuring our servitude to carry on while these people, you know, carry on getting the money and start asking questions about diversity and how important it is to have diversity. And then they go to another panel and say the same thing and get their expenses paid. I mean, this is something that in many ways I sort of think to myself, I don't give a damn about all this. I just want to get on with what I'm doing. And it's that freedom that if we do give a damn, that's a freedom we give up. And we're not really, then we don't become regulators of our own actions, which always worries me a bit. Paul's right. You know, if you take money off the state, you've got the ROI has got to be pin sharp. You've got to show what you're spending your money on. And that's the same. And that's also that encourages a sort of turpitude. You see sometimes in the Benelux countries where there are particular ways of doing things and people do not step outside the line. I mean, luckily, Front is one of the best things that's happened in Dutch music in the last 3-4 years because of the fact that they are independent. You know, and they don't speak the language of, you know, the language that you hear all the time. So there are very there's some very doubtful sort of equations that we have to solve if we're going to take that up.
Maybe it's not just a question of should the state give us money or not. There are other things that the state can do. For instance, there's an ongoing debate about how Silicon Valley big enterprises don't pay taxes in the countries that they get money from. Do you think that from the music press we should ask the state to do their job and find a way of for these big corporations to pay taxes in each territory and a fair share of taxes?
I think definitely, and I mean taxes, sure, and I think what also the state has to face up to is and we talked about the positive sides of Spotify and of streaming, but the exploitation that comes with it of small artists, I think that's something that needs to be addressed through national legislation, and I mean within the European Union, that's probably a place to do it. Because I feel it's exploitation similar to the exploitation that delivery couriers are experiencing in the Netherlands or generally now, that is not acknowledged at the moment, and I think it's something I've been working on that hasn't come onto paper yet, but I think that's something that needs to be addressed, and that music media can play a large role in moving that discussion forwards. And making people more aware, especially on the top layers, that there's a problem there, that is not functioning as well as it could be, and that needs to be addressed, I think. So, I mean, I think we definitely can play a role in that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm back. Hello, everyone. I think we'll give way. It's been super interesting. I'll give way to a few questions from our viewers, if you agree. First one, Pau Grima, writing from Cádiz. He runs a publishing company and management company called Meari. He says, maybe he got a bit late because we talked about this, but his question is a bit different, so I'll just place it. Spotify is thinking on making the algorithm for the artists payable now. Do you think this would make the label pays the grant, artists get a dime model? Or did this model never leave? And how could this affect on the newborn artists? Anyone? We already talked about this, yes. But you can answer, Pau, so he will know your opinion about it.
I don't think we're talking about the thing that they announced last week.
Yeah.
Where artists could pay more to
artists. I believe it's that artists can renounce part of their royalty.
Right.
They can reduce their royalty in order to be better placed in discovery playlists.
I think the effect of that would be marginal. I think that'd be more for a lot of artists. That'd be bigger loss than it would be a gain. Because they're already not getting any. It's really marginal what you get from a stream at all. So I think that the money that they would give up would hardly be paying back. It's a bit of a gamble. I don't think it's any good of a measure.
Something that's not really mentioned so much as well, I don't know if that's worth pulling in here, but it's the power that the major labels have got within Spotify as entities who have shares in that company. In terms of placing. They get guaranteed placements on certain playlists. They can game the system. The labels know which playlist they can place a certain artist on to, push them to the top for a particular week. So even with, someone renouncing their royalties, they're not going to get anywhere against, that kind of wall of power that the major labels have got within Spotify.
That's a very interesting point that may lead to a whole new panel and a whole new hour.
Don't ask journalists.
So I'll switch to the next question. This comes from Mario Pinchudo in Badajoz. He says, don't you think Spotify has become a very limited platform in terms of having the ability of playing a wide variety of different and unknown artists? He adds, every time I start an album or an artist radio, Spotify continuously starts throwing up their promoted artists, till a point when you realize you're not controlling what you're listening to, but Spotify is. And this thing is even worse with Amazon Music. When you ask to listen to some artist, you always get the same 20 or so song playlists in the same order also. So annoying.
I mean, it's right, but I mean, aren't we all just used to this on every single platform we have? You know, this is the same with YouTube. It's the same if you watch Netflix. It's constantly pushing stuff that you don't really want to watch.
And you just skip it.
Yeah.
You have the power to skip it. I mean, you're not sat in a factory. Do you know what? I used to work, when I first came to the Netherlands, I used to work in a factory and we used to have Sky Radio on and you couldn't turn it off. So you sat there listening to this bloody radio and you're filling a lorry full of tulip bulbs and you're thinking, if you play Guns N' Roses one more time, I'm going to commit larceny. Do you know what I mean? We still have the power to turn around. We are human beings, and we can do what we want to, you know, outside of the law. But like, you can just change. You don't have to follow these platforms.
And I think it's our role as platforms to inject some of that, or we can have that role, injecting newer music in those cycles that people find themselves in. So if you find yourself in a cycle and you sometimes consume something that's not part of that, from be it the QUIETUS, be it any of our platforms, you can change that yourself. I think if you keep consuming from both those parts, I think that'll solve itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not either or anymore, is it? It's and this is the point.
Definitely.
That, you know, we have that power still to have the and.
Another question is about how Paul and Cynthia, but I believe all of you said that there's always an audience for music writing. But the question was, are they ready to pay to read, or are they ready to support financially that music writing?
I don't know. I mean, we've always gone in with the idea that we don't want to charge for our content whatsoever, and I don't think we ever will. But I think I just come from a different background in that regard. I consume stuff for free, mostly online, and I'm not prepared to pay for something unless it's absolutely amazing. You know, outstanding quality journalism. So
that's the way of internet since the beginning.
Yeah.
Free.
I think
to change that, it's not.
Because I mean, the QUIETUS has just started a subscription service, and I'm even subscribed to the things I'm bloody writing, which is, you know, stupid me. But there again, it is interesting because Paul's right. It has to be good, and you know, taking a subscription out for the Times doesn't mean it's going to be good. And I do notice that I'm not reading things that I'd idly read. I seem to be reading much more of the Guardian than ever, because it's free, and that should really answer itself. Really, I think it all comes down to how good the offer is, and I think if the offer is good, yeah, people will pay for it. But I think it will not be. You will never get the reach ever that you would get for free. It's simple as that. You've got to do both, pretty much. I think. I mean, so
on this note, it's a different subject. But yesterday, when we spoke with Bandcamp, Ali, the European rep for Bandcamp, he said that the community in Bandcamp, when they buy a record, there's a suggested price, but the price could be like €7 or more. He said that 40% of people buying on Bandcamp pays more than the allocated price. Yep. So, and you mentioned that you read the Guardian. I do too, and you always get that yellow box on the bottom.
Yeah. Yes.
So, do you think that works in a way, or is that just residual?
Well, I've never paid for them. I mean, but I used to buy the paper. I mean, I buy the paper when I go home, but I'd also go and buy other papers just to read, just because I like reading paper. I don't. But there again, the Guardian. You know, when you go to a festival like Tallinn Music Week, they're desperate to have the Guardian. You know, they're desperate to have. You know, we need. And even if you're thinking, well, I can write better than what they've written in the Guardian. You know, well, we can. But the point being that the brand itself is much richer in the sense that it's able to be widely distributed than it would be if, you know, if we wrote you had something that was a subscription only site. I mean, I think it's the same with the Spectator. They always go on about the fact that they've grown because they got loads of subscriptions. But again, you can still read stuff on the Spectator for free. Not that I'd advise it, but then again, it's just something that, you know, it's like an and model. You can do both. Who knows? We're sitting right in the middle of it, aren't we?
The reason we've never gone with a paid model is because we're mainly dealing with content for very, very new artists. So the level of audience who's going to pay for that is really, really narrow. The QUIETUS, you guys did a good thing because your hooks for the paid stuff were features by a lot of quite famous, you know, authors, named writers, people that you would kind of go, well, that's, you know, it's exclusive content by someone that you're not going to get anywhere else. Yeah. And you need to have those hooks. You know, I mean, other paid services have done exclusive podcasts or interviews you can't access anywhere else. And it's about having those things. And, you know, those things are very hard to pin down and nail. And, you know, they depend on an artist that is massively in demand. And as a fan of that artist, you can only access that content by paying. Or it depends on a writer who has a big following in the first place. And unless you have that, it's very hard to make a paid model work, I think.
Yeah, agreed.
I think I'm going to wrap up with the last question from Cesar Andion from Madrid. He works at Live Nation. He says, algorithm is a great tool for everyone, helps lots, but will never kill the gut feeling. Don't you think, Paul, everyone?
You're feeding your algorithm. It's like you're picking up what the machine is going to show you. So it's good. It's good. It just, if you need to know more and you don't want to feel controlled, you just go out and find out what else you can find out in Bandcamp that it's not in Spotify, and you have your options.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, I think everything you hear on Spotify is there because another person heard it first and went with their gut reaction. So this always belongs with at least one other person reacting to a song before it hits a streaming service.
Mm-hmm. That's a vital point, because we tend to talk human beings out of this entire process, and you know, the reason these things appear coded in Spotify or wherever or on whatever site is the fact that some human process, you know, has initiated that algorithm.
Yeah,
God knows what's in the future when machines talk to machines, but for now we can say that these things have been built by a sort of human initiative or human impetus at some level, and that's why, you know, we can sort of have a relationship with it. I think sometimes we forget that and realize actually we're part of that story. But we're here to have the icing on the cake in many ways now. Before we were just, you know, the entire cake, but now we're sort of the icing. We're the bit that people look at and go, oh, I like that. But yeah, the human part of the digital story really should be a bit more human, or should be humanized. And again, it's something that we sort of treat in this really weird binary way, which I never really understand.
Okay, so this comes to an end. Thank with these words from Richard, wise words. I'm very happy to have had such articulate, entertaining, and interesting guests on this panel today. Thank you very much, Cynthia, Richard, Ruben, Paul, and Victor. I thank everyone who has been watching, and please come back from 5 p.m. I invite you to watch our live broadcast all night, and we will be live every day until Sunday night. It's Monkey Week for real this year. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
And see you soon, hopefully in person.
Stay safe, everyone.
Okay. Thank you.